Okay, so we're recording. Thank you, Ashley. As I mentioned in the email, there are no prepared talks. Um, so we'll just go do the highlights as we usually do, and then just jump into a discussion. One of the things that I kind of prepped is a couple questions about the tap call, the format, the frequency, the leadership. So if you can think about those things, and if you have any other questions, then we maybe can jump to them. I usually did a survey, and I will do one again. But since we didn't have any talk today, I figured at least the folks that are joining, maybe we can have a discussion about that and see where it goes. Okay, so with that, we'll go through the normal things that we usually do, which is CFF, runtime, Bosch, and then extensions. So Swana is here. Hey, Swana.
Hello.
Hi. Updates for CFF or whatever we want to cover. I'll try to share my screen actually, so that way we'll see it. Go ahead.
I didn't put in the notes yet, but I don't have a whole lot of updates from the foundation. It's just the end of year work that we are focused on, end of year reporting, end of year kind of taking stock of the inventory and everything. But I'm also working on doing a bunch of, at least talking to a bunch of folks in our community that work or interact with app teams that have not even looked at Cloud Foundry. So you will see, at least in the future, how we will evolve the content, or at least reshape the content on our website, which is a lot more useful for either your teams or the end user teams to use and to access when they're kind of still in that education phase. So that is pretty much what we're doing from the foundation side, mostly the end of year stuff. Just a quick note, I know this is a burning question for pretty much everybody, including ourselves here at Foundation. We are still working out the details on summits. So at least TLDR is there will be summits into 2020, but we're figuring out how, when, where, and what form should it be. I think everyone here is aware that we are 2019 summits were a lot more expensive. I'm doing air quotes here, but expensive for the foundation, because we ended up spending a lot more. And we usually try to break even given the sponsorships and everything, but we couldn't get to that for 2019 summits. So we're trying to just plan in such a way that 2020 summits will be extremely useful for the community, but not quite as expensive for the foundation. So more details to come as soon as we figure out what is the ideal way, or what is the ideal form or shape of summit. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot to report. I don't see Chris here. Did he join? Yeah, I don't see Chris here, but if you have any, I know the CLA stuff should all be smooth and working now, but if you still have any issues, feel free to ping him on Slack or email.
Shwama, is the foundation also considering maybe doing online summits? So that you don't have to spend money at a site, but people can join?
Like a virtual summit?
Yeah.
That is something, at least, that we haven't explored yet, because I know the community values face-to-face presence and interactions a whole lot. So we're looking at co-locating with any other event. So that is at least the set of options that we have on the table. But if it's a virtual summit, I would like to at least hear either from you, Norm, or from anyone else here, how would it be valuable? Like, how can we structure a virtual summit so that it still feels like you're getting the same value out of it as an in-person summit?
My feeling would be you could have interactions with the people. The talks would be more interactive talks on topics, and people can be sharing their information at that point. So I could, if somebody has an interest in, let's say, bill packs updates and stuff like that, they get a discussion around that and what you do at your site and how to maintain that type of stuff. So it would be a different style of talks where it's more of people leading the discussion more than anything else. And then you're meeting the people at that point. And then when you go off to these other summits, like KubeCon and other places, you can have meetups in there where you get to meet the people at that point. So therefore the foundation would have to spend a whole bunch of money on that, and it'll allow other people to join. It'll allow things to be recorded automatically, right? And people can see what the discussions are. It's just an idea.
Okay. That is okay. That is helpful. I'll talk to the team here as well, mainly Chip and Abby and Devin, to see what they think of it. I think there are a lot of online tools, at least, or organizations that can help us host these virtual summits or virtual conferences a lot more effectively and efficiently. So that's a great suggestion. I will definitely. I've made notes, so I'll see if that is also something that is useful. I know that some of the member organizations also are looking into hosting Cloud Foundry days, which are like the day-long events, day-long summits, one-day free events at their region. So I still need to circle back and see if they have finalized anything, but virtual summits are a good idea. Thank you, Nora.
Yeah, that could be a nice solution. And of course, you're contemplating. I mean, I love that idea too. But just to lay it out there, the foundation is also contemplating co-locating, right, with other big conferences, like for instance, such as KubeCon, since we just talked about it, and potentially reducing to one. Is that also part of the discussions? Just to be clear.
Yeah, I think KubeCon is definitely not on the table at this as a co-locating event because it's fairly large and gathering focus, or it still will be equally expensive. I think it would be cheaper to host an individual Cloud Foundry Summit than to co-locate it with KubeCon. So from a cost perspective, we will not be, there won't be any difference, which is why we're looking at other events like, there's member events, and also there's open source summit, which is like the Anchor Linux Foundations event. So we're kind of looking at options in that perspective.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, cool. Any other questions for Swana? All right. So I guess we'll now switch to the project highlights. We have Eric. So.
Hey, Dr. Max. Yeah, give a quick overview of some of the things that the runtime teams have been working on over the past month or so. Release integration, they haven't released a new CF deployment major version since major version 12, but they have been producing a lot of auto bumps with stem cell updates. So they had mentioned that automation falling into place recently, and that seems to be humming away nicely. One interesting thing from the CLI team, they've recently published a versioning table that has like different categories of changes and what you would expect, like from a command change and then the corresponding versioning change, a patch or a minor or whatever. So I think that's nice guidance to see within the community around consistency and expectations around versioning. A bunch of the component teams have been making progress on deeper integration with Kubernetes deployment models. So in particular, Irene released 1.0 as a stability milestone. So they consider their initial set of APIs pretty stable at this point. And so people can start building on them and rely on them to be backwards compatible. And then both the CAPI and UAA teams have been starting work more seriously around providing K8s deployment artifacts from the teams themselves. And CAPI's also been simultaneously prioritizing work around integrating with the KPAC resources to take advantage of cloud native build packs running on Kubernetes. And also networking, they've been developing a new component that they're calling CF Route Sync, to convey CF route information to Istio configuration for ingress routing. And so they have some initial work on that in one of their repos that they're working to integrate with Irene. I think there's they're working to adjust to a last-minute labeling change that the Irene folks made in terms of labels versus the label selectors they need for the services. And then I'm also know that Logreader's long been looking to close out the deprecation timeline for the Firehose, and they've recently provided some ops files into CF deployment to allow people at least to test with that configuration and to validate that they have all of their integrations and replacements back in place. So I think that's about it in terms of highlights from the runtime PMC over the past month or so.
All right, thank you, Eric. So I pinged Morgan for Bosch, but I don't see anything from him. So maybe he'll update me later, and I'll update the files or the agenda, or we'll get it updated there. I'll stop sharing my screen. So for the extensions, one of the things we did last month is to go through and kind of clean up, basically figure out which projects are still active. As you know, this is kind of like a playground experimentation. So there's a few projects that, after discussing with the owners, maybe it makes sense for them to move to Attic. So that process has started. So if you go to the agenda, you'll see the list. And then also links to the active projects as far as their updates. There hasn't been much. So that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss in terms of the discussion later today, after this, I guess, is what to do with the process if we want to change things and so on. So in terms of extensions, that's pretty much where we are. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me or for Eric or for Morgan, and I'll pass it along to him. No? Okay, so I guess this might be a very short call. The last thing I wanted to mention is, so I'll share my screen to show you those questions. I think, I've been running these for a few years now, and I'm happy to help, but at some point it might make sense to start looking at what to do next. So let's go here. Sorry about that. So I had a couple meta questions about, okay, so that's the danger of sharing a screen, of the cap call, right, for 2020. So I think one of the big questions is whether or not the frequency that we have right now, which is monthly, is still useful to people, or should we change it? I don't know if anybody has opinions on this. Obviously, the next one could be, since they're not as well attended as they used to be, we could always make an effort to try to attract more people, but there's also, we probably need people to go on mute. All right. The next obvious thing is to maybe make them quarterly. So any thoughts on this, or we keep them monthly? No?
I think, Dr. Nick, this is normal. I was thinking maybe every other month or so, was just always new things coming out. Then it won't be as a heavy hit, doing a monthly call.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
At least, and then if that doesn't work, then move to quarterly. But I do find it useful to hear updates on what's going on in different areas.
Okay.
And I'm assuming there's going to be some more movement, in the Kubernetes world and Cloud Foundry and stuff, integration. So I think you start tracking people as you get topics that people care about.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I didn't think of that. So yeah, one of the things, part of why I'm asking those questions, because I'm gonna do a survey, and I'm gonna try to see if I can query the community on specifically things like this. So obviously you guys can help me decide what those questions are. So maybe one of the questions could be, if we change it, do we keep it per month, do we keep it every other month like you're suggesting, or do we do something like quarterly? So excellent, thank you for that. And then the last thing is in terms of leadership. As I said, I've been running these for a while, and it might help to get some new blood. So I was thinking whether or not it makes sense for me to sort of step down and offer it to other people. So that's also something I'll put on the agenda to get folks that want to participate and want to take on that, and hopefully step up and we can do a smooth transition. So those are the two questions that I had. I don't know if there's any comments on those or any other questions, comments.
How much work does it take you to organize a CAB call? I mean, I'm trying to understand how much effort it is and how much extra time is that you have to keep up with stuff on it.
It's not too bad. Certainly not the top of the things that I have to do, just for IBM and for community work around different projects. I think the biggest work is to try to find those talks, right, and keep them interesting. And obviously, if it's somebody that you don't know, then kind of get a preview of the talk before, or if you've seen it, obviously that's easier, like a YouTube video or something like that. So it's not a lot of work. I think the main thing is to be able to keep a beat going and find the talks. Like for instance, this month I was hoping the Rini folks would present, but nobody got back to me, and I kind of figured, well, if they didn't get back to me and they've already presented this year, and plus also at Summit, that they just didn't have anything new. So I could have pushed harder, but I figured, it's the last one. Maybe it's best to just, maybe terminate early and so on, right? But like at KubeCon here, I could probably find 2 or 3 talks that I could try to invite. So, it's that kind of thing. It's a constant, flow, but it's not so much. Were you thinking of volunteering?
I am a little bit. I need to, talk to Brian and Dr. Nick about it.
Okay.
So Dr. Nick would be really good at this.
Yeah, right? I know.
Right. So I'll see Dr. Nick at the KubeCon, so I could always pester him unless he's in the room with you.
No, he's not in the room with me. But yesterday at KubeCon, I spent a fair amount of time with him. Not in the room though.
Right, but I'm just thinking, you need somebody who's dynamic and, like you are, and stuff like that to keep things going. And I understand that doing it over and over again, you get tired, right? You get worn out. So you need, as you need blood.
I mean, that's one way of saying it. The other way is that, it's always good to allow other fresh blood, quote unquote, because, there'll be a bunch of things that you will see that I don't or anybody else, right? So that's
one thought that comes to mind is I see Norm's point as well, to kind of understand or to get a sense of the amount of work that goes into this, and also Max's point of view that we would need fresh eyes or fresh blood into this role. How about maybe for the next few calls, Max, you ask for volunteers to just take ownership of that particular call, like not to take over as a CAB call host or organizer for the future, but just individual calls, so they can kind of get a sense of what goes in, and they also get that quote unquote experience of leading the call. And then as we go forward, if that person repeatedly volunteers, or if that volunteer feels like they can take ownership or they're comfortable taking ownership of you can probably step up, at which point you can either co-host or co-organize or be a kind of a passive backup.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. I'm happy to do that. Okay, cool. So Norm, I have you as a potential volunteer here. So what I'll do is, based on this discussion, unless any other feedback comes in here, is to essentially, as part of my survey, which I did, you remember, the past 2 years, I'll include a question on this and then see if we get any responses. And of course, if Norm, you're one of the volunteers, then give me some kind of thumbs up so I can include you there. And then for January, we'll at least co-host, and then I'll still participate in the call. So
Yeah.
And it goes without saying for anyone, and I think if it makes sense for you to mention it even in that question in the survey, Max, you can also mention that anyone from the foundation can help them with reaching out to folks as well. Like if those volunteers are not able to hear from the folks that they're trying to reach out to, and obviously they will come to you first.
right.
If you're busy or if they're not responding to you as well, even the foundation, like any one of us, Chris, myself, or Chip, or any of us can also kind of take that workload as well, share that workload.
Sure. And I'm glad you mentioned this, Swarna, because one of the unsung heroes of the CAB calls is somebody that's here right now, is Ashley from Stuck and Wayne, who has been very, very good at pretty much recording the calls and also helping upload them. I mean, Zoom, I think, sends you a link, so you have to do the work to get the file to the foundation so it gets put on YouTube, and of course to remember to start the recording and so on. So thank you, Ashley, as always. Okay, any other questions about just CAB call or in general? Otherwise, I'll be sending that survey probably in the next week. I think next week is Thanksgiving in the US, so probably either Monday or Tuesday or the week after that. And then I'll keep it open until January, so that way we get hopefully a good amount of responses.
Yes, sorry if I missed something you already said, but I just see in the agenda that Abacus and Blockhead are going to Attic. I wanted to have some insights about why it is so.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you that then. So for Abacus, the SAP team has asked to go to Attic because internally they, at least from my understanding, they had some pressure to move to a quote-unquote proprietary version, and because it's deeply integrated with their internal system, so they couldn't keep going on supporting the external, the public version and their version. And then at IBM, unfortunately, and I've tried very hard on this, we did exactly the same thing too. I mean, believe me, I'm not happy about this, but sometimes things are outside of your control. So that's what happened with Abacus. But the project itself is still quite useful. So if somebody wants to step up, that's a possibility.
Yeah. Had they reached the version 2.0 milestone, or where were they?
They were getting close to that. So one of the main things on version 2.0 was to increase performance and a series of updates to the API, and I think they got close to that. The other thing also is that the Abacus is written in Node.js, and they tried to do that version 2.0 in Go. Not necessarily because it was going to gain performance, but just as a prototype, and also to see if it would increase the amount of contribution, just because in Cloud Foundry, Golang is certainly a language that people mostly know. But I believe they kind of left that on the side. One thing I don't know, and we could ask them, is I don't know if their internal projects got, basically was the Golang version, right? So I don't have that information.
And Blockhead?
Yeah, for Blockhead, it's one of those interesting projects. It's like, we've seen this many times. I'm sure you have, and I have, and many of us here, that things like technologies such as, blockchain, they get these hypes, and then it kind of dies down. Obviously, there's still quite a bit of activities going on blockchain. We have an entire team and so on. But the team at IBM that did the Blockhead, which is to integrate blockchain with, closer to Cloud Foundry, the result were, it worked, but there wasn't a lot of interest, at least in that overlap of blockchain and Cloud Foundry as we anticipated. So the project has been kind of like there, and there's no activities, and just to kind of maybe raise the concern, so anybody that wants to pick it up, they kind of decided, well, maybe it makes sense, because what we were trying to do for the extension is to say, well, it's not necessarily a failure, but if a project is not active, then maybe it makes sense to move it to Attic, and then if somebody wants to pick it up or clone it, do whatever. So that's what's happening. It's not that we wouldn't be interested. It's just that the community there wasn't as much interest as we had anticipated.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for this.
Sure. And I mean, especially since this came from IBM, I can connect you with the folks that led this, Nima, and then maybe if you want to have further discussion with them, okay, ping me offline and I'll do that.
No.
Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, I'll give you back 30 minutes of your time. And I thank you and have a happy holidays. And then we'll talk again via email for the, for the survey. And then the next call will be in January. Thank you, everybody.